Damn them all, every single one who smiled while stabbing me in the back. My name's Lillian, 36, and I saved my family's legacy with every dollar I had. They repaid me with silence. But what they didn't know was, I had kept the receipts. And when I struck back, I didn't just reclaim my name, I bought their future. But what they didn't know was, I had kept the receipts. And when I struck back, I didn't just reclaim my name, I bought their future. My name is Lillian, I'm 36 years old, and I live in Napa Valley, the land of vineyards, sun-soaked hills, and a silence that sometimes feels too familiar. The land has belonged to my family for 3 generations. Windrest Estate is its name. Locals speak it with the kind of reverence they usually reserve for heritage wines and buried memories. But I never wanted to be part of the wine business. While my parents spent their lives among fermentation tanks and vineyard rows, I took a different route. I moved to San Francisco with nothing but an old laptop, a rented room in a walk-up apartment in Oakland, and a gut feeling that I could make something of myself, on my own terms. I started with small freelance gigs, late nights poring over balance sheets and learning the financial language of risk, return, and patience. I built my investment analysis firm from the ground up, quietly, relentlessly. It took 10 years, but now, my company advises major funds and growing businesses across the West Coast. The respect I earned wasn't inherited, it was fought for. One spreadsheet and sleepless night at a time. Still, despite everything I built, I was never the golden child. That title belonged to my younger sister, Vanessa. Vanessa with the perfect GPA. Vanessa with the Yale MBA. Vanessa with the brand new Audi my parents bought her before she even landed a job. They gifted her a downtown condo in Los Angeles, paid her tuition in full, and sent care packages like she was royalty. Me? I took out loans, ate canned beans, fixed my own leaky faucets, but I never complained. Not once. I believe that everyone had their own path. I simply chose to walk mine alone. We weren't estranged, just different universes. Family dinners were filled with awkward silences and subtle glances. My parents would ask, "How's your little firm going?" As if it were a hobby. Vanessa would flash me a tight smile, her designer bracelet catching the light as if to say, "You tried." And yet, I loved them. Not blindly, but because somewhere beneath the generational tension and unspoken favoritism, there was still a thread that connected us. I wanted to believe it mattered. That belief was what kept me answering their calls. That belief is what would shake everything that followed. It was a Thursday afternoon when my phone buzzed. An unfamiliar tone in the middle of a quarterly report review. My screen lit up with 3 simple words. Call from Mom. I hesitated. She never called during work hours. Texts, maybe, but a call? I swiped to answer. Her voice trembled before she even said my name. "Lillian, your dad, he had a spike in blood pressure. It was bad. The doctor says he needs to avoid emotional stress at all costs." My grip tightened around the phone. "Is he okay now?" "He's stable," she said quickly. "But there's more. The bank, the vineyard's in trouble. Foreclosure notice just came in." I felt my breath catch. Windrest? Foreclosure? My childhood flashed before me, the feel of grapevines brushing against my arms, my grandfather's hand guiding mine as I trimmed the leaves. That place was more than a vineyard. It was a part of us. Of me. "We didn't know who else to call. Vanessa's still interning. We don't know what to do," she said, voice cracking. There was a long pause. The weight of their silence crossed the line. "We need help, Lillian. You're our only hope." My mind swirled with questions. Why didn't they tell me sooner? Why is it always me when things fall apart? But above all, can I really let the place that raised me be taken by strangers? And yet, beneath the panic, I felt something I hadn't expected. A strange pulse of warmth. They had called me. They trusted me, finally. Or did they simply have no one else? I didn't sleep that night. The numbers on my spreadsheet blurred into the soft glow of the monitor. Outside my San Francisco apartment, the city pulsed with its usual rhythm. Cars hissing over rain-slicked asphalt, someone yelling in the alley, a dog barking 2 blocks away, but all I could hear was my mother's voice echoing in my mind. "Your dad? He needs to avoid emotional stress. The bank just sent a foreclosure notice. You're our only hope." Those words stuck like wine stains on white linen. You don't forget them, no matter how hard you scrub. I sat with a pen in my hand, not sure whether I was making a financial decision or an emotional one. Maybe both. I opened my banking app. My savings stared back at me. 10 years of sacrifice, of saying no to vacations, no to upgrades, no to anything that didn't move my company forward. $720,000. That's what I had. I could practically hear Vanessa's voice in my head. You're insane. Who sends that much money without a contract? But this wasn't for her. Or for them, really. It was for Windrest. For the soil I once ran barefoot across. The grape leaves I used to draw faces on, the smell of crushed berries under my nails after harvest season. It wasn't just a vineyard. It was memory. It was identity. And if I didn't act, it would be gone. 48 hours later, the wire transfer was complete. I stared at the confirmation screen for a long time, hand hovering over my phone. Then I texted my father. Transfer complete. Let me know what else you need. He replied a minute later. Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll never forget what you've done. I held the phone close, rereading those words again and again. Never forget. It sounded like a promise. Or maybe a prayer. I drove up to Napa that weekend, heart thudding like it had something to prove. The air smelled different there. Brighter somehow, laced with the tang of soil and early spring growth. I parked near the old barn where I used to play hide-and-seek with Vanessa. She was waiting by the vines, her hair loosely tied back, tears already in her eyes. You came, she whispered. Of course I did, I said, unsure whether to smile or cry. My parents hugged me like I was something sacred. My father held on a second too long. My mother's perfume was the same as always, lavender and sunblock. We're going to rebuild, my dad said, his voice filled with something I hadn't heard in a long time. Hope. You'll be part of this, a major role. Vanessa nodded eagerly. We'll do it together, Lil, like when we were kids. My throat tightened. For a moment I let myself believe it. That maybe, just maybe, things were different now. We spent that Sunday walking through the vineyard. I jotted down notes. Equipment to upgrade, distribution channels to revisit, marketing ideas they had never tried. I even called up an old friend from the industry who owed me a favor and pitched getting Windrest into the Sandy Wine Expo. It felt real. It felt like the family I had always wanted to be part of. Later that evening, Vanessa snapped a photo of the vines, laughing as the wind pulled at her jacket. She posted it without telling anyone. I only saw it later that night on social media. Back to the roots, family legacy, Windrest strong. I stared at the screen for a long time, my stomach twisting. There was no mention of the money, no mention of me. Just her smile. Still, I shrugged it off. Maybe she didn't mean anything by it. Maybe this was just her way of showing pride. Wasn't that the point? I asked myself. Wasn't this what I wanted? To be included? To belong? But a small voice inside me, a stubborn, careful voice, whispered, Don't mistake being needed for being valued. I ignored it. I wanted to believe. God, I wanted to believe. The following weeks passed in a kind of golden blur. Morning walks through the vineyard became my ritual again, checking vine growth, talking to the field staff, running my fingers along the bark of the old sycamores my grandfather once planted. I took photos, but not for posting, just for documentation. I built a financial recovery plan, assessed debt restructuring, and outlined a 5-year growth strategy. I was doing what I did best, solving problems in silence. Vanessa, meanwhile, was radiant. She floated through meetings in pastel blazers, smiling wide, tossing around phrases like brand elevation and youth market synergy. Our parents beamed with every suggestion she made, even the ones that contradicted sound logic. I kept my mouth shut. Pick your battles, I told myself, until one evening I came across a draft press release tucked into a shared folder. Windrest's new era, led by the visionary Vanessa Roberts. My name wasn't there. Not once. I stared at the screen, rereading each line like maybe somewhere in the fine print I'd find acknowledgement. A single mention, a nod, anything. Nothing. I walked into the house that night just as dinner was being served. My father was pouring wine into crystal glasses. Vanessa sat at the end of the table, laughing at something my mother said. I cleared my throat. Did you approve this? I asked, holding up my tablet with the open draft. My father looked over, furrowed his brow. That's just marketing fluff, honey. Don't worry about it. It's not fluff if it rewrites the facts. Vanessa smirked faintly, her fork tapping against the rim of her plate. You're overreacting. Everyone knows you're involved. I felt something twist inside me. Do they? I didn't respond. just quietly excused myself from the table and walked outside into the vineyard, where the air was cool and the silence didn't lie to me. 2 weeks later came the harvest celebration. The courtyard behind the fermentation barn was strung with golden lights, the barrels turned into tables, guests milling around with glasses of red wine and warm smiles. I wore a navy dress, simple but clean. My mother told me I looked sharp, dear. Vanessa wore ivory satin and diamond studs. I tried not to think too hard about it. Midway through the evening, my father stepped up to the mic. He wore the same worn turtleneck he always saved for speeches, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted it. "Thank you all for coming to Windrest's harvest celebration," he said, voice deep and proud. "This year is not just a bountiful season, it's the beginning of a new chapter." I smiled. I thought maybe this was it. Maybe he'd say it. That we did this together. That I wasn't just a silent investor in blood. "We're thrilled to announce," my father continued, "that the new CEO of Windrest Estate will be our youngest daughter Vanessa, fresh from completing her MBA at Yale and full of vision for our future." Applause, laughter, cheers. The wine in my glass trembled slightly in my grip. My lips parted but no words came. Vanessa walked to the mic, beaming, eyes glittering under the lights. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. I felt the spotlight slide past me like I wasn't even standing there. No one mentioned the money. No one mentioned the planning, not even a whisper. I set my glass down and slipped away from the crowd. The night air hit my face like a quiet slap. I sat alone on the stone steps behind the barn, staring at my phone. My fingers moved before I could stop them. I scrolled back to that message from my father 6 months ago. "Don't worry, sweetheart, we'll never forget what you've done." I let the screen go dark. They already had. Suddenly I didn't feel like an investor with, or a daughter, or even a person. I felt erased. My jaw tightened. I opened my contacts and tapped on a name I hadn't spoken to in years. Charlotte Mayers, litigation attorney. I typed a single message. Urgent. Family investment, no contract, possible fraud. She replied in minutes. "Tomorrow 9 a.m., bring everything." Charlotte's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building in downtown Santa Rosa. Clean, minimal, with sharp edges and no wasted space. Just like her. She greeted me with a nod, not a smile, and motioned toward a leather chair across from her desk. "I need everything," she said, pulling a blank case folder toward her. I placed the folder I'd brought on the table. Bank statements, wire confirmations, text messages from my parents, email exchanges. No contract, no loan agreement, just blind trust, sealed with family warmth and a crumbling promise. Charlotte flipped through the documents with quick, precise hands. $720,000, she muttered, eyes narrowing. Sent to Windrest Estate LLC with no terms, no legal acknowledgement. "I trusted them," I said, quieter than I meant to. I wasn't thinking like a professional, I was thinking like a daughter. Charlotte leaned back, crossing her arms. "That's the first mistake. In law, trust without paper is fiction." A flicker of shame flared in my chest, but I didn't look away. "There was a witness," I added quickly. "Troy, the head accountant. He was there when I presented the recovery plan. My father said, in front of him, 'Your investment will be protected and you'll have a role in management.' Troy heard it. I remember the look on his face, like he didn't believe it either." Charlotte straightened. "Now we're talking." She picked up her phone. "I'll reach out. If he corroborates that statement, we can start with a formal demand. And if they push back, we escalate. Hard." By the time I left her office, the anger in me had shape. It was no longer a vague ache or a silent wound. It was a strategy. 2 days later, Troy met me at a cafe near the edge of town. He wore a slightly wrinkled shirt and looked like he hadn't slept well. "I should have said something sooner," he said as he slid a thick envelope across the table. "But I wasn't sure where you stood. I didn't want to get caught in a family war." "This isn't a war," I said, keeping my voice even. "It's an audit." Inside the envelope was a printed report. Windrest's spending breakdown since the date I transferred the money. I flipped through it slowly. Mercedes SUV ingredient transport. Vanessa's MBA HR development. Tuscany flights market research. The numbers blurred for a moment. I took a slow breath and forced myself to focus. At the bottom, a line in bold. Total misused funds, $610,000. Troy leaned in. "I've also written a sworn statement. I'll sign it in court if needed." I nodded. I couldn't speak. Not yet. That evening I sent Charlotte a 2-word message, proof secured. 3 days later, Charlotte's email hit my inbox. Subject, more serious than we thought. Inside was a legal analysis and a shocking discovery. My parents had quietly created a new entity, Windrest Future Holdings LLC, registered just 1 week after I wired the money. The authorized names? My father, Vanessa. Charlotte's voice was cold on the phone. They're transferring assets, grape presses, equipment, even the Windrest wine label, all being rerouted to this shell company. If they finish the process, Windrest Estate LLC, the one you funded, will be legally hollow. A cold knot settled in my chest. I saw my grandfather's face in memory, his thick, calloused hands brushing dirt off a vine. A weak root dies fast if no one protects it, he once told me. He wasn't just talking about plants. They're planning to bury me under paperwork, I whispered. They're planning to erase you, Charlotte replied. I stared at the ceiling of my apartment, feeling something crack open inside. I wasn't just a forgotten daughter anymore. I was now their threat. Troy called again the next morning. Meet me, he said. Now, I found something else. We met at a small bar in Healdsburg, a place none of my family would ever think to go. He opened his laptop and pulled out a USB drive. They've started transferring land, he said, scrolling fast. Plots 4, 6, and 8, Windrest's best vineyard lots, are being moved to Windrest Future Holdings, labeled as strategic restructuring. My jaw clenched. Those are the heart of the estate. He nodded grimly. Without them, Windrest can't compete. And worse, I found a draft contract. They're planning to merge both entities, then file bankruptcy for the original company. If they succeed, you'll lose legal grounds to claim anything. I stared at the screen. This wasn't just betrayal. This was premeditated erasure. Why are you helping me? I asked, staring him dead in the eye. Troy hesitated. Then he said, simply, because I owed your grandfather. And because no one in that house deserves to hold on to what he built. I swallowed hard and reached for his hand. You're not just helping me, I said. You're protecting what's left of him. That night, I forwarded everything to Charlotte. She called me within 10 minutes. This is no longer a family dispute, she said, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard. This is financial fraud, asset concealment, and breach of fiduciary duty. I stood by my apartment window, watching headlights blur into streaks along the road. What's next? I asked. There was a pause, then Charlotte said, We file, and we freeze everything. 3 days after Charlotte sent the official demand letter, requesting full repayment with 6% interest or we would escalate to federal authorities, my phone rang. Vanessa. I stared at the screen, letting it vibrate in my palm. A minute passed, 2, then it went to voicemail. I didn't expect what came next. Her voice, ragged and loud, exploded through the speaker. What the hell are you doing, Lillian? Are you out of your mind? Filing legal papers against our family? I didn't move. You're going to destroy everything. Windrest's reputation, my career, Mom and Dad's credibility. Do you even care? I waited a moment, then called her back. She picked up mid-rant. Calm down, I said, voice low and sharp. I'm not destroying anything. I'm holding people accountable. This is family, she hissed. You don't drag family through the courts. No, Vanessa, I said. You don't drag family through deception then pretend loyalty will clean the mess. She fell silent. Then came a question I hadn't prepared for. Why now? She asked, quieter. Why didn't you just talk to us first? I did, I said. I talked with my silence. I waited. I watched. I gave all of you time to do the right thing. Another beat of silence. You're not just hurting them, she whispered. You're hurting yourself. I let out a short, bitter laugh. If asking for what's mine is painful, maybe that says more about you than me. I ended the call. That evening, Troy and I met again, this time at a diner on the outskirts of town. He handed me another file, his eyes tired but determined. They're panicking, he said. The bank denied their emergency credit extension. Vanessa showed up at the branch in tears. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat. This was never about vengeance, I said softly. I just wanted the truth to mean something again. Troy gave a small nod. They don't believe in truth, he replied. Only preservation. The next morning, Charlotte called. They've responded, she said, curt. They're offering $250,000 up front, the rest over 2 years. I exhaled sharply. Not acceptable. She didn't even flinch. I figured, I'll send a rejection with final terms, full amount with interest within 10 days, or we proceed. Later that afternoon, I heard a knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, I froze. It was my mother. She looked smaller somehow, less composed, less curated. Her blouse was wrinkled, hair pinned loosely, and in her hands was a manila folder. We file, and we freeze everything. 3 days after Charlotte sent the official demand letter, requesting full repayment with 6% interest, or we would escalate to federal authorities, my phone rang. Vanessa. I stared at the screen, letting it vibrate in my palm. A minute passed. 2. Then it went to voicemail. I didn't expect what came next. Her voice, ragged and loud, exploded through the speaker. "What the hell are you doing, Lillian? Are you out of your mind, filing legal papers against our family?" I didn't move. "You're going to destroy everything. Windrest's reputation, my career, Mom and Dad's credibility. Do you even care?" I waited a moment, then called her back. She picked up mid-rant. "Calm down," I said, voice low and sharp. "I'm not destroying anything. I'm holding people accountable." "This is family," she hissed. "You don't drag family through the courts." "No, Vanessa," I said. "You don't drag family through deception, then pretend loyalty will clean the mess." She fell silent. Then came a question I hadn't prepared for. "Why now?" she asked, quieter. "Why didn't you just talk to us first?" "I did," I said. "I talked with my silence. I waited, I watched, I gave all of you time to do the right thing." Another beat of silence. "You're not just hurting them," she whispered. "You're hurting yourself." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "If asking for what's mine is painful, maybe that says more about you than me." I ended the call. That evening, Troy and I met again, this time at a diner on the outskirts of town. He handed me another file, his eyes tired but determined. "They're panicking," he said. "The bank denied their emergency credit extension." Vanessa showed up at the branch in tears. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat. "This was never about vengeance," I said softly. "I just wanted the truth to mean something again." Troy gave a small nod. "They don't believe in truth," he replied. "Only preservation." The next morning Charlotte called. "They've responded," she said curt. "They're offering $250,000 up front, the rest over 2 years." I exhaled sharply. "Not acceptable." She didn't even flinch. "I figured. I'll send a rejection with final terms, full amount with interest within 10 days, or we proceed." Later that afternoon, I heard a knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, I froze. It was my mother. She looked smaller somehow, less composed, less curated. Her blouse was wrinkled, hair pinned loosely, and in her hands was a manila folder. She didn't say a word, just held it out. I opened it slowly. Inside, a deed to a small plot of land in her name, a letter pledging their home as collateral, her wedding ring of 40 years appraised and listed, a note scrawled in her delicate cursive, "This is what we can offer." She looked at me, eyes glistening. "It's not everything, but it's something." I stared at her, feeling nothing, not anger, not pity, just emptiness. "I don't want your land," I said quietly, "or your jewelry. I want justice. Let the courts decide now." Tears slid silently down her cheeks. She turned and left without another word. That night, I sat alone at my desk, laptop open. I pulled up a real estate listing I'd bookmarked weeks ago, almost out of instinct. Stone Creek Vineyard, 190 pristine acres, located directly across from Windrest. From its highest hill you could see the entire Roberts estate, Windrest's former rival, now a symbol. My fingers hovered for only a moment before I texted Charlotte. "Stone Creek is for sale. I want it." She called back instantly. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. "This will hit them where it hurts." "Exactly," I said. "I'm not trying to start a war," I added. "But if they want one, then this time, I'm not showing up unarmed." The next morning, I stood on the hilltop of Stone Creek with the broker, Ryan Calloway. He was middle-aged, shrewd, but kind-eyed. "I've heard of you," he said, shaking my hand, "and frankly, I think you're the kind of blood this valley needs." We negotiated quickly, efficiently. 10% down, no legal obstacles, the rest contingent on the resolution of any pending dispute. Back in my car, I stared across the valley. I could see Windrest's fermentation barn from here, the new guest area, the old sycamores. I raised my phone and snapped a single photo. That afternoon, Charlotte drafted a new letter. No threats, no dramatics, just one attachment, a photo from Stone Creek looking down on Windrest. The message was clear. If Windrest didn't pay the full $720,000 plus interest within 72 hours, I would become their neighbor, their competitor, and their reckoning. 20 minutes after she hit send, my phone buzzed nonstop. Dad, Mom, Vanessa. I didn't answer. I let the calls come and pass like waves crashing on rock. That night I sat at my window, staring out at the dark rows of the valley. This wasn't just about debt. It never was. It was about being seen, heard, respected. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one quietly waiting for approval. I was the one drawing the line. The first email came at 6:12 a.m. Subject: Urgent. Partial repayment proposal. Attached was a revised offer from Windrest's legal counsel, $500,000 up front. The remaining balance, interest waived, over 18 months. Charlotte didn't even need to ask. Decline, I replied, tapping the screen like it owed me respect. She followed up with a final response. Full repayment, $720,000 plus 6% interest, within 72 hours. Otherwise, we proceed with SEC filings and asset freeze. And attached to that email? The photo. Taken from the hilltop of Stone Creek, overlooking Windrest like a calm threat. Just hours later, the dominoes began to fall. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my father. I answered. Lillian, he rasped, voice dry and strained. Do you know your mother's been crying every night? I said nothing. We know we made mistakes. But did you really have to blow this up? Involving government regulators? Filing motions to freeze accounts? I kept my tone even. I haven't spoken to the press. I haven't posted a single thing. But I will keep sending the truth to the people who do have power. We're trying to raise the money, he insisted. The banks won't lend while the SEC's looking. We're trying. You mean now that your daughter has leverage? I asked. Or now that you realized I'm not the quiet one anymore? He went silent. Then finally, he said, Vanessa's falling apart. She hasn't eaten since yesterday. Can't you just come to dinner? We'll talk it out like a family. I paused, then delivered my terms like steel. Unless Charlotte is at that dinner, there is no conversation. This isn't family anymore, it's business. He hung up. That same evening, Troy sent me a quiet text. Windrest's local bank just pulled credit. Vanessa showed up crying. Office gossip spreading fast. It's getting ugly. I read it without reacting. Then another message came in. Charlotte, their attorney called. They're offering full amount, principal plus interest, loan approved from Redwood Bank, terms attached. I sat still. My heart didn't race. It settled. It was done. They caved. 2 hours later, Charlotte confirmed. Funds wired, $761,200 confirmed. I opened my banking app, watched the number blink into life. $761,200. Exactly what I asked for, not a cent less. No apology, no note, no thank you. Just a message from Dad. 3 cold words, the money's transferred. Nothing more. It felt surgical, almost sterile. But strangely I didn't care. Because for the first time in my life, I owed nothing to anyone in that house. Not emotionally, not financially, not even out of guilt. 3 days later, I stood on the balcony of the Stone Creek guest house, pen in hand, signing the final purchase contract. The land was mine now. Every acre, every vine, every sliver of golden afternoon light that rolled down the hills. Ryan Calloway smiled as we exchanged paperwork. You're the strongest woman I've ever worked with in this business, he said, eyes full of something close to reverence. I gave a slight smile. I'm not strong, I said. I just stopped letting people step over me. That same evening, Vanessa showed up at the gate, unannounced. Her once glossy hair was tied into a limp, careless bun. Dark circles beneath her eyes betrayed more than exhaustion. They revealed collapse. She didn't wait for permission. She walked slowly to where I stood under the olive tree by the vineyard. We need to talk, she said, voice brittle. I folded my arms. About what? She looked down. I know I was wrong, she whispered. It got out of hand. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I said nothing. You don't have to be our enemy, she said. You got the money, you got Stone Creek, you won. Why can't you just let Windrest go? I gave a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Because Windrest should have been mine, not because of the money. Because I gave up everything, my career, my savings, my life, to save it, and all of you chose someone else. Vanessa didn't respond, just stood there, shrinking. After a long silence, she said quietly, Dad hasn't spoken to anyone since signing the documents. Good, I said. He should use that silence to think. Then I turned and walked away. Inside, Troy was waiting at the new office desk. Papers spread across the reclaimed oak surface, maps of vineyard irrigation and seasonal yield plans open before him. He looked up as I entered. His expression said it all. Relief, respect, and something deeper, belonging. "Welcome home, Lillian," he said. I nodded. I didn't need to reply, because for the first time in my life, I was standing on land that belonged entirely to me. A future no one could take. 3 weeks after acquiring Stone Creek, I renamed it Solara Ridge. Solara, a word I coined from Sol for sun and Lara for renewal. It sounded soft but unshakable, like something that had survived a fire and bloomed again from ash. On the hilltop behind the fermentation barn, I stood overlooking the rows of vines, each one stretching with promise. The wind carried a familiar scent: earth, grapes, dust, and something else. Freedom. This land didn't hold memories of betrayal. It held potential. The first major decision I made as owner was offering Troy the CFO position. I didn't hesitate. He blinked in surprise. "You sure you want me? I've been with Windrest for over 2 decades. I need someone who knows exactly how they failed," I replied, "so we never do it the same way." He nodded, his voice quiet. "Then I'm in." Troy didn't come alone. He brought a full network. Experts from Oregon, a vineyard consultant from Sonoma, and a branding strategist who'd worked with multiple award-winning wineries. We became a team of survivors and second chancers, and that made us stronger. Our assets were modest: rich soil, outdated equipment, and a loyal field team I inherited from Stone Creek's previous owners. But I'd started my first business in a 400-square-foot apartment. I wasn't intimidated. This time, I wasn't just making wine. I was crafting a story. Our first product line was named The Second Harvest. Symbolic, clean, honest. The label was minimalist, an illustration of a hand rising from the soil, gripping a ripe cluster of grapes. Nothing fancy, just truth. We launched a hiring campaign across local towns, bringing in workers not as seasonal temps but as collaborators. During breaks, I sat beside them on overturned crates, hands stained like theirs, laughing over soil jokes, talking yield, sun, and balance. No one called me Miss Roberts. Here, I wasn't the daughter of anyone. I was just Lillian of Solara Ridge, and that was enough. Charlotte stopped by one afternoon, bringing a bottle of Chardonnay from an old client and a folder of new documents. She was smiling. "Congratulations," she said, holding up the bottle, "to the woman brave enough to cut blood ties to protect her dignity." I poured wine into 2 plastic cups, clear, unassuming. We toasted under the shade of the old oak tree. "I don't think I lost a family," I said after a sip. "I think I just finally found myself." She nodded quietly. Sometimes the loudest victories are the ones that echo inside. A week later, I received an email from a major distributor in Los Angeles. Subject: Holiday Partnership Proposal. They wanted 200 cases of our debut batch for the winter season. We hadn't even bottled yet. I called an emergency team meeting. Everyone stared at me like I'd grown wings. Troy leaned in. "We don't even have labels printed yet." I smiled. "Then we better get printing." "We'll never make it in time," someone said. I looked around the table. "Look, this brand isn't about volume, it's about meaning. If 200 people open their holiday wine and taste our story in every sip, we've already won." Silence. Then, applause. Meanwhile, Windrest was shrinking. Troy caught wind of an internal report. Marketing was cut, staff hours slashed, bank oversight had tightened. "They're bleeding," he said. I didn't gloat. Instead, I looked toward the ridge where their vines lined up like tired soldiers. Stagnant. Still under old names and old power. They weren't my concern anymore. One morning, just after our first fermentation had finished aging in oak, a package arrived at my office. No return label, just my name, handwritten in script I hadn't seen in nearly a year. I opened it slowly. Inside was a worn, leather-bound journal. My breath caught. My grandfather's vineyard notebook. I ran my hand across the scuffed cover, tracing the initials carved into the leather, C.R. Charles Roberts. Inside were his blending notes, hand-drawn wind maps, pruning patterns, even doodles from when Vanessa and I were kids, and tucked between 2 pages, a folded letter, my father's handwriting. Shaky, but clear. "Dear Lillian, I've been rereading this journal. In every page, I see you. The precision, the care, the strength. I don't have the right words. I only know this was your grandfather's treasure, and now it belongs with the one who truly understands its worth. Dad." No grand apology. No pleas. But something in me softened. A little. I pressed the letter to my heart, not because I forgave, but because I understood. Even regret has a language. That spring, the Second Harvest debuted at the North Bay Wine Expo. Critics described it as unexpectedly balanced, rich, complex, like a personal story in liquid form. They didn't know how right they were. Vanessa was no longer CEO of Windrest. The bank had appointed a neutral director. Word was she'd moved to the city and enrolled in an art course. It was the first thing she'd done outside of our parents' shadow. As for my mother, I hadn't heard a word since the day she handed me her wedding ring. But I wasn't waiting. Some distances don't close. And that's okay, because I wasn't walking backward anymore. 1 year after officially acquiring Solara Ridge, I stood on the West Hill where the lavender bloomed wild along the fence line. In my hand was a glass of Cabernet Franc. The same grape my grandfather once taught me to prune with hands still too small to hold shears properly. A soft breeze passed through the rose. I closed my eyes and listened, not to the wind but to the stillness inside me. No regret, no bitterness, just clarity. I'd always thought legacy was something passed down. Now I knew better. Legacy is something you build when no one thinks you can. We sold out the second harvest, 2,500 bottles, gone within 4 weeks. Each label signed by hand, each box shipped with a simple message tucked inside. From what was lost, something stronger grew. Our second line was already in development. I named it Legacy Bloom, a tribute not to the past, but to what rises from it. Troy came up with the name. I didn't change a word. Funny, he said one night, sipping a late harvest Syrah by the barn. You used to fight for a seat at their table, now everyone wants a seat at yours. I gave a tired smile. I stopped asking for a place when I realized I could build the damn house. That fall, something unexpected happened. An older woman showed up at the tasting room, hair silver, cane in hand, eyes sharp with a pain I recognized instantly. She introduced herself as Nora. I ran my family's winery until my son forced me out, she said, voice calm but full of a buried storm. Said my old ways were holding us back. He took my name off the deed. I listened. Not as a business owner. As someone who had stood in that exact kind of silence. I read your story in the paper, she added. You reminded me of something I forgot, that no one decides your worth but you. I reached for her hand. You may have lost a family, I said gently, but you still have a future. That's the part they never get to own. That conversation sparked something bigger. I launched an event series at Solara Ridge called Reclaiming Roots. It wasn't about wine, it was about voice. Every month we invited people, mostly women, mostly over 40, who had been silenced in business, in family, or both. We shared legal resources, emotional stories, even wine pairings with pain. People cried, people laughed, people found each other. One woman told me, I thought I was broken, then I came here. Now I just think I was planted too deep for the wrong soil. That's what I wanted Solara Ridge to be, not just a winery, a place where things bloom again. Sometimes I walk past the fermentation barn and hear the field hands joking about vines like they're stubborn old friends. Sometimes I see a tourist holding a bottle of the second harvest like it's something sacred. Sometimes I see Vanessa's name in a wine magazine, mentioned briefly in a piece about leadership turnovers. And sometimes I see my mother's ring in the back of my drawer and wonder if she still cries. But I don't wait for her call. I don't stand by the door. I've learned that closure is not owed, it's created, and I've created mine. This isn't a story of revenge. Revenge is sharp, fast, and burns out too quickly. This is a story of justice, of taking back what was stolen with a pen, not a knife, with silence, not slander, with proof, not poison. When Windrest tried to erase me, I didn't scream, I filed. When they offered pity, I offered terms. When they looked down from the ridge, I bought the hill above them. And when they turned their backs, I turned my vineyard toward the sun. On the last page of my grandfather's journal, I wrote a single line. A legacy begins again in the place once rejected. That sentence will one day appear on the back of every bottle we produce. Because this, the soil, the sweat, the strategy, the survival, is not just mine anymore. It's a lighthouse. For every person who's ever been written out of the story. For every voice that was told to stay quiet. For every daughter who was expected to clap while someone else took credit. You don't need to burn the old house down. Sometimes, you just need to plant something stronger next to it. And let your roots show them what real growth looks like. Epilogue. A note to you, reader. If you've read this far, maybe part of you recognizes my path. Maybe you've been overlooked, underestimated, dismissed by those who should have stood by you. Maybe you've given more than anyone knew and received less than you deserved. Let me tell you something no one told me. You are not selfish for wanting recognition. You are not dramatic for demanding fairness. You are not ungrateful for choosing truth over silence. You are just finally awake. And that's the beginning of everything.